It happened in less than 30 seconds. The CEO stood at the podium, his smile tight and polished. Behind him, a glowing screen flashed a new company org chart, sharp lines, bold names, clean cuts. And then, with a tone that tried to sound clinical but landed like a slap, he said it. We're streamlining legacy roles, including Ms. Hart's. Gasps rippled across the conference room. A few people looked at her, most didn't. Lena Hart just sat there, second row from the back, shoulders square, expression unreadable. 9 years of building systems that held this company together wiped out in a single slide, and a phrase that echoed louder than it should have. She's obsolete. Not thank you, not will be transitioning, just obsolete. And in that moment, something cracked, not in Lena, but in the room. Because they expected her to fall apart, but she didn't. She didn't flinch. She didn't blink. She only tilted her head slightly, like she was filing something away. What no one in that room knew was that Lena owned 54% of the company. Before I tell you how everything unfolded after that moment, can I ask, where are you watching from today? And more importantly, have you ever been treated like you didn't matter in a place you helped build? Drop a comment below if this stirs something in you. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear right now. Long before the boardrooms, the charts, and the cold email announcements, there was a moment no one remembers. Not because it wasn't important, but because it wasn't public. 8 years ago, Orion Vantage was falling apart. Not just in numbers or investor confidence, it was bleeding out, quietly. Systems crashing, morale collapsing, investors pulling out one after another. People whispered about buyouts, layoffs, the end of the line. And Lena Hart was just a systems architect back then. She wasn't a director, she wasn't on the strategy team, she didn't even have a corner office. But she saw the cracks. More importantly, she believed the company still had something worth saving. She didn't raise her voice in meetings, she didn't pitch herself as a hero. But when Orion's former CEO made a desperate call for emergency capital to stop a hostile acquisition, Lena answered, not with advice, with action. She wired the full amount. Every dollar of the inheritance her mother had left her, years of quiet savings gone in a single wire transfer. But she asked for no recognition, no new title, no press release, only one thing, ownership, held through a discrete legal entity. Everhart Holdings, a name no one at Orion recognized, but one that quietly held 54% of the company's shares. And she never told anyone, not her colleagues, not even her closest friends at work, because it wasn't about control. It was about keeping something alive, something she'd helped build line by line, system by system. People looked at her and saw someone ordinary, steady, background. But behind the scenes, Lena was the reason Orion Vantage still had a future. And the man who just erased her from the org chart, he had no idea the company he was restructuring was already hers. But soon, he'd learn. Gavin Chase arrived at Orion Vantage like a press release in a tailored suit. Fresh from a consulting firm in Chicago, armed with a Stanford MBA and a string of buzzwords polished to perfection. He had the kind of presence that filled a room before he said a word. Sharp smile, confident stride, voice tuned for investor calls. On his first day, he gathered the department heads for a vision alignment session. That's when Lena first heard it. We need to cut legacy processes, shed dead weight, streamline at scale. Legacy, dead weight, streamline. He said them casually, like removing old furniture, but every syllable landed with intent. Lena watched from the corner of the room, hands folded in her lap, expression neutral. She'd seen men like him before, men who believed change was something you announced, not something you earned. He didn't ask questions, he didn't listen. He just drew new lines, restructured entire teams, and replaced experienced leads with agile hires, people who looked good on LinkedIn and nodded at every slide. Within 2 weeks, entire departments had shifted. People who had kept Orion afloat through its hardest years were suddenly sidelined or repurposed. No warnings, no explanations, just efficiency rebranded as progress. And when Lena walked past the executive suite one afternoon, she overheard Gavin speaking to his assistant, tone casual, like ordering lunch. She's a holdover from the old era, sentimental value, easy to phase out. He didn't say her name. He didn't need to. Lena kept walking, heels clicking softly on the marble. Her face didn't change, but something behind her eyes did. He thought he was leading a revolution. He didn't know he was lighting a match in a room full of gas, and the fire hadn't even started. It started with a login error. Lena opened her dashboard one morning the same way she had every day for years, except this time, access was denied. No warning, no explanation, just a blank screen and a message, permission revoked. Contact administrator. She tried again. Same result. At first, she thought it was a glitch, a system update maybe, something temporary. But when she emailed IT, their reply came back almost too fast. Access was removed per executive directive. No further details available. No further details. She sat still for a long moment, her hands hovering over the keyboard. Then, quietly, she opened her calendar. The weekly systems sync, gone. Quarterly performance review, reassigned. The strategic roadmap meeting she'd led for the past 3 years, now hosted by someone from Gavin's hand-picked circle. It was like watching yourself vanish in real time. Not with noise, not with confrontation, but with silence. Methodical, deliberate silence. No one said she was fired. No one said she'd done anything wrong. She was simply removed. And in the hallways, people noticed, but no one said a word. That's how it works in places like this. You keep your head down. You don't ask questions. You act like nothing happened, hoping you're not next. Lena didn't complain. She didn't protest. Instead, she opened a private document on her home drive and started typing. Dates, times, meeting changes, access logs, every subtle cut, every missing piece. If they were going to erase her, she would write everything down. Quietly, carefully, she began building a file. Not out of fear, out of precision. And as she clicked Save on that first entry, a new email appeared in her inbox. No sender, no subject, just 5 haunting words. You're not the only one. Lena stared at the screen. Then she leaned back and began to prepare. The message sat in Lena's inbox like a whisper. No sender, no subject, just 5 plain words. You're not the only one. She stared at it for a while, unsure if it was a mistake. But a few minutes later, another email arrived. Same sender, same blank subject. Just a line of text. He did this at Ravencorp. 3 women left. Quietly. Lena's fingers hovered above the keyboard, unsure what to reply, if she even should. But then, just as suddenly, the message disappeared, auto-deleted, vanished from the inbox like it had never existed. Luckily, Lena had already taken a screenshot. She leaned back in her chair, the hum of the office around her suddenly louder. Phones ringing, keyboards clicking, polite conversations floating through the walls. It all sounded the same, but it wasn't. Something had shifted. This wasn't just corporate strategy. This wasn't just about streamlining. It was a pattern, a calculated, quiet removal of women who didn't fit Gavin Chase's version of agility. And Lena couldn't ignore the knot that formed in her stomach. She thought back to the last town hall. The way he used words like legacy, overhead, and inefficient personnel. She remembered the way he avoided eye contact with her. The way her team was reassigned piece by piece until there was nothing left to lead. Now it made sense. He wasn't threatened by underperformance. He was threatened by women who knew too much. And for the first time in weeks, Lena didn't feel isolated. She felt angry, focused, sharpened. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about what he'd done before and what he was trying to do again. She opened her private file and added a new tab. Whistleblows, anonymous. She didn't know who had reached out, but she knew why. And when someone sends a message like that, they're not just informing you. They're asking you to do something. What Lena did next would change everything. It came in the form of a forwarded email, late at night. No subject line, no message, just an attachment. Lena almost deleted it, but something made her open it. The header was enough to make her stomach turn. From Gavin Chase to board distribution, subject, leadership concerns, strategic direction. She scrolled down slowly. Each sentence was colder than the last. Miss Hart has shown signs of disengagement. She's missed multiple strategic meetings. She's increasingly uncooperative with key initiatives. Recommend transitioning her to a non-operational advisory role. No data, no proof, just statements framed as facts. Spoken with the calm detachment of someone tightening a noose. And at the bottom, the most telling line of all, pending shareholder approval. Lena let out a quiet breath. So that was the plan. Gavin wasn't just trying to sideline her, he was trying to write her out entirely, neatly, quietly, through a paper trail. He wanted her gone without a fight. But there was one problem. The shareholder he needed approval from was Lena. She smiled, just slightly. Not out of amusement, but because she finally understood the shape of the game. He thought she was backing down. He thought she was fading quietly into the background. What he didn't know was that she'd been documenting every move, building a wall of receipts while he crafted his story. And now he'd put it in writing. She saved the email, flagged it, printed a copy. Then she sat back in her chair, eyes fixed on the skyline outside her window. The city lights flickered like quiet signals, small, sharp, steady. He thought this was checkmate, but the board hadn't seen her next move, and it was coming sooner than he'd ever expect. By the time Friday came, Lena had stopped hoping things would fix themselves. She had stopped expecting fairness or clarity or even basic honesty. Instead, she shifted into a different mode, one she hadn't needed in years, not since the last time the company nearly collapsed. Back then, she saved Orion Vantage by wiring her inheritance. This time, she would save it by exposing the man trying to hollow it from within. She started her morning with a list: names, dates, logged entries. She'd been documenting for weeks, but now the pieces had to come together. Not just information, evidence. She called Evelyn Ramos her longtime legal advisor, the only person who knew the full truth about Everhart Holdings. "It's time," Lena said simply. "I figured," Evelyn replied. "He's moving faster now." They spent hours cross-checking policies, reviewing chain of command documents, confirming exactly who had signed off on what and who hadn't. That afternoon, Lena met quietly with two former department leads who had been abruptly removed under Gavin's restructuring. Both had stories that echoed her own revoked access reassignments, without explanation, sudden performance flags after years of clean records. They didn't want revenge. They just wanted it to stop. Lena listened, took notes, and asked one thing from them. "If I speak up, will you back me?" They nodded. "If you stand, we stand." Before leaving the office, she stopped by IT, just a casual visit. Asked a few questions about dashboard permissions and calendar controls. She recorded the answers on her phone. Voice, low tone, calm. Every word mattered now. Every sentence was a tile in a much bigger mosaic. And late that night, as she reviewed her files one last time, something new appeared in her inbox. A calendar notification. Meeting title Board Strategy, Leadership Realignment, date next Monday. Guests, Gavin Chase, 2 board committee members, and a blank line labeled pending. Lena stared at it, the glow of the screen lighting her face. The board was preparing to make a decision. They just didn't know the whole story yet. But by Monday, they would. Monday came with a sky too clear for what was about to happen. The boardroom sat on the 21st floor, all glass, all silence. Sunlight poured in through tall windows, casting long shadows across polished wood. Everything about the space looked sterile, neutral, but Lena knew better. Rooms like this didn't echo with emotion, they absorbed it. She arrived 5 minutes early. Gavin was already there. Of course he was. He greeted each board member with that same flawless smile, his voice smooth, his confidence unshaken. He didn't even glance in her direction. As the meeting began, Gavin stood, clicked his remote, and launched into a presentation titled Orion 2.0: Vision, Agility, and Restructuring for Growth. Slides flickered, charts soared, buzzwords stacked neatly on every page. Efficiency, optimization, evolution, and then the final slide. Leadership Realignment Proposal, transitioning Ms. Lena Hart to a non-operational advisory role. Duties redistributed to high-performing junior teams. The words were clinical, clean, and final. A few board members shifted in their seats. No one looked at Lena. Not yet. Gavin's voice softened with a practiced touch. This is not personal. It's about progress. We need leaders aligned with the next chapter. He took his seat with calm certainty, folding his hands as if the matter was already closed. Silence settled. Then the chairman spoke. Before we move forward, shareholder approval is still required at this level. Gavin nodded confidently. Pending, but I don't expect any issues. That's when Lena finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, but unmistakably clear. Actually, there is an issue. The room turned toward her. Gavin's smile faltered for the first time. Lena reached into her folder and slid a document across the table. A single sheet, simple, stamped, and signed. I don't approve the proposal, and I believe the board deserves the full picture before any decisions are made. The chairman raised an eyebrow, unfolding the paper. His eyes scanned the signature at the bottom. Then he looked at Gavin, then back at Lena. Something had shifted. The air changed, and Gavin Chase was no longer in control. But what Lena revealed next would leave the entire board speechless. The room held its breath. Lena sat still, her fingers resting lightly on the edge of the folder. For a moment, no one spoke. The chairman looked down at the document she'd handed over, then at Gavin, then back again. Miss Hart, he said evenly, what exactly are we looking at? Lena met his eyes. Calm, certain. Proof, she said, of intention. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small flash drive. No labels, no drama, just plastic and silence. May I? She asked. The chairman gave a single nod. Lena stood, walked to the projector console, and inserted the drive. There was a soft click. Then a voice filled the room. Gavin's voice. She won't last through Q1. We'll reassign her team. First, revoke system access in phases. Make it look like performance drift. There was a pause in the audio, then more colder. By the time the board sees it, she'll look like she checked out months ago. No fight left in her. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was dense. One board member leaned forward, brows pulled tight. Another adjusted her glasses and glanced toward the chairman. No one looked at Gavin. Not yet. Lena returned to her seat, calm as ice. This wasn't about structure, she said quietly. It was a setup. Evelyn, seated further down the table, cleared her throat. HR logs confirm multiple directive changes came from Mr. Chase's office, including those affecting Miss Hart's access scheduling and staff reassignment. Finally, the chairman spoke. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Mr. Chase, do you have anything to say? Gavin opened his mouth, but no words came out. Then finally, weakly, this is a trap. She twisted it all. Lena didn't flinch. She just looked at him steady. No, Gavin, you wrote this story. I just brought the ending. And with that, the room shifted. The vote that followed was swift. But the aftermath, that's where the real weight would settle. Because power doesn't just disappear, it moves. And now everyone was watching where it would go next. The official announcement came 3 days later. No press release, no applause, just a simple memo from the board. Effective immediately, Gavin Chase is removed from all executive duties. There was no farewell party, no glossy goodbye. He was just gone. And in the silence he left behind, something unexpected happened. The office began to breathe again. People spoke more openly. Laughter returned small, cautious at first, like birds returning after a storm. There were no grand celebrations, no public acknowledgments, but the shift was real. Still, Lena didn't smile right away, because this wasn't victory, not yet. This was only the clearing. The work was just beginning. A week later, the board called her in. The chairman stood as she entered, holding a white envelope with her name embossed in silver. He offered it with a nod. "We'd like you to take the lead. Executive Director of Strategic Operations." Lena didn't reach for the envelope right away. Her voice was steady but low. "If I accept it, it won't be business as usual." "Then what would it be?" the chairman asked. She answered without hesitation. "First, a new ethics charter, clear lines, non-negotiable. Second, every employee Gavin sidelined gets a voice in rebuilding their teams. And third, we don't bury what happened, we learn from it." There was a pause. Then the chairman nodded slowly. "Agreed." She took the envelope, slipped it into her bag, not because she needed the title, but because now she had the power to shape what came next. That afternoon, Lena returned to her office. It felt different. Not bigger, not brighter, just lighter. She replaced the old desk plaque with one of her own, a simple phrase etched into brushed metal: "Integrity is not optional." And for the first time in months, she allowed herself to breathe. But power doesn't just restore, it reveals. And what Lena discovered next would test everything she thought she'd already faced. The building felt different. Not louder, not busier, just less tense. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel threatening anymore. For months, silence had meant isolation, the closing of doors, the vanishing from calendars, the invisible barriers that made even eye contact feel risky. But now the quiet held something else: respect, reflection, maybe even healing. Lena walked the same hallway she'd walked 1,000 times, only now people didn't avoid her gaze. Some nodded, a few smiled. One quietly left a sticky note on her door that said, "Thank you." She didn't know who wrote it. She didn't need to. Her office had become a different kind of space, not just for direction, but for truth. Employees dropped in, not because they were told to, but because they wanted to talk, to ask questions. Sometimes just to sit in the calm. There was no rush to rebuild everything Gavin had dismantled. Lena knew this kind of work took time. It wasn't about rewriting mission statements. It was about trust, slow, steady, and earned back one conversation at a time. Still, some scars remained. A few names were still missing from team rosters. Some voices hadn't returned. Not everyone could be convinced to come back. Lena carried that weight quietly, but not alone. One afternoon, as she was reviewing department proposals, Evelyn stepped in with a folder. No words, just a look. Lena opened it. Inside, a brief note clipped to the top of a report. Unresolved complaint, Ravencorp, 2019. Personnel involved, G. Chase. Lena stared at it. Her fingers tightened just slightly around the page. Because what she thought was over might only have been one chapter, and someone else, somewhere, might still be waiting for their voice to be heard. In the end, Lena didn't win with a grand speech. She didn't flip a table or storm out of a meeting. She won by staying, by watching, by refusing to disappear quietly. Gavin's name was removed from the directory. His office emptied out overnight like he'd never been there at all. And while the board never publicly admitted their blind spot, they acted. New safeguards, anonymous reporting channels, real oversight. But Lena didn't stay to bask in it. She stayed to rebuild. The employees who had been silenced were now part of the solution. They helped reshape departments, redefine protocols, and most importantly, they began to trust again. Lena never asked for praise, but one morning she walked into her office and found a small card on her desk. No signature, just one line. "You reminded me that being quiet doesn't mean being powerless." She held on to that one because that was the truth. In a world that often rewards volume, the loudest voice, the boldest claim, the flashiest presentation, it's easy to forget that strength can also look like patience, like documenting when no one's looking, like standing firm when your name's been erased, like showing up again the next day and the next, even when the air feels heavy. Lena's story wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming space, with clarity, with evidence, with grace. And sometimes that's the loudest victory of all. So now I want to ask you, have you ever had to fight quietly for something you knew was right? And when you look back, what gave you the strength to keep going? Share your story in the comments if you feel ready. You never know who needs to hear it.